Something happened 14 hours ago that the world's most powerful institutions are desperately trying to cover up. At exactly 23 o'clock UTC on July 22, 2026, automated deep space surveillance clusters operating out of the Royal Observatory in Edinburgh confirmed a discovery that has sent quiet shockwaves through classified research networks. An interstellar object catalogued as 3I/Atlas has officially entered its final operational phase directly above our planetary plane. It is not passing beside us or harmlessly near us, but sitting directly overhead. The details surrounding what this object is actually doing are far more disturbing than anything mainstream channels are prepared to admit. The official narrative being crafted by space agencies sounds simple and reassuring. They want you to believe we are merely observing a rare planetary gravity assist maneuver where a cold, inert rock swings past our sun on a one-way trip through the solar system. It sounds logical and scientific, which is precisely why it works so effectively as a cover story. When you strip away the sanitized press statements and look directly at the raw telemetry data, a reality emerges that no standard model of comet behavior can explain. The tracking matrix for 3I/Atlas tells a fundamentally different story. The object is currently positioned 270 million kilometers from Earth while maintaining a constant velocity of 58 kilometers per second. In the precise math of orbital mechanics, those figures are extraordinary. That level of sustained speed along a confirmed open hyperbolic trajectory means this object is entirely unbound by the gravitational pull of our sun. It is not orbiting, it is not slowing down, and it is passing through our solar system a single time on a path calculated millions of years ago in an unmapped region of our galaxy. That alone should trigger intense global scientific debate, but the question paralyzing defense monitoring stations is behavioral. Why did this supposedly dead mass of interstellar rock wait until the exact microsecond of its closest approach to Earth to activate secondary transmission systems? Dead rocks do not run on schedules. Inert ice does not wait for a target. Yet the tracking data shows a timed activation sequence that matches our planet's position with a degree of precision that natural physics cannot produce on its own. To grasp the gravity of this situation, one must closely analyze the debris trail left in the object's wake. In a standard comet flyby, you expect a chaotic cloud of melting ice and dust pushed outward by solar radiation into an unpredictable halo. It is irregular and completely dependent on surface chemistry reacting to heat. What strategic sensor arrays tracking 3I/Atlas recorded is entirely different. Instead of a random dust cloud, automated systems detected a series of tightly concentrated geometric filaments coming from the object's surface. These filaments are not drifting aimlessly. They are maintaining a fixed structural alignment specifically oriented toward Earth's primary communication infrastructure. That is not a coincidence, nor is it a quirk of the solar wind. It is deliberate geometry with clear intent, marking the start of a discovery that the scientific establishment has tried aggressively to hide from the public. When research teams filtered out atmospheric noise from raw light curve data captured during the peak of the flyby window, the numbers defied every natural model. The object is not shedding mass like a normal comet. It is releasing material in synchronized, rhythmic pulses operating with a margin of error under 3 milliseconds per cycle. That regularity is impossible for a natural process. Ice does not sublimate on a timer, and rock does not fragment to a steady beat. The breakdown of a comet under solar heat is chaotic, driven by surface irregularities and chemical inconsistencies that make rhythmic pulsing impossible under standard planetary science. The only honest explanation for what sensors recorded is that something inside this object is generating those pulses deliberately. An internal mechanism is operating within this entity, and it has been running long enough to cross interstellar space and arrive precisely on schedule. Understanding this internal system requires stepping outside traditional space science concepts. When engineers design a mechanism to survive millions of years in the frozen vacuum between stars, they build it with a passive thermal regulation protocol. This creates a dormancy layer that keeps active systems offline until a specific environmental threshold is met. The tracking matrix suggests the outer shell of 3I/Atlas functioned as that exact type of protective barrier. It was constructed from complex organic polymers and dense silicate compounds engineered to absorb cosmic radiation while keeping the interior insulated and sealed. As the object plunged deeper into our inner solar system and solar heat hammered its surface, that outer layer did not fail. It executed a program. The thermal reaction that stripped away the exterior was not structural damage, but a deliberate countdown designed to burn off protective casing at a calculated rate, exposing an interior reflective titanium silicate core at the exact moment the object crossed Earth's orbital path. The timing was precisely engineered, and the rhythmic venting pulses recorded by observatories are the direct mechanical output of automated release valves discharging pressurized cryogenic propellants from an ancient internal stabilization matrix that has been waiting for this exact moment for longer than human civilization has existed. This is not a comet breaking apart under stellar heat. It is an interstellar machine completing the final sequence of a journey that began in a distant corner of the galaxy. The single most convincing piece of evidence supporting this conclusion came from spectroscopic instruments at the European Southern Observatory containing data that mainstream institutions quietly refuse to release. Normal comets produce well-understood spectral signatures dominated by water ice, carbon monoxide, and simple methane chains. The chemistry is familiar because it matches the primordial materials that formed our own solar system. The spectral lines recorded from the inner core of 3I/Atlas show none of those familiar elements. Infrared spectrographs captured a massive concentration of heavy isotopes and complex metallic matrix composites completely alien to our solar nebula. Specifically, the data confirmed a nickel-chromium-titanium ratio that matches the composition of industrial aerospace superalloys engineered for high-temperature resistance and electromagnetic shielding. This is not exotic space dust, but a manufactured metallurgical architecture sitting inside a disguise of ancient ice, waiting to be seen. The public explanations offered for these impossible readings follow a predictable pattern. Spokespersons and institutional scientists describe the chemical anomalies as the product of an unusual carbonaceous chondrite meteorite that evolved in a distant nebula. It is a convenient narrative because it cannot be proven or disproven without direct sample collection, which is not happening. This narrative protects comfortable public beliefs at the expense of scientific truth, and that choice is deliberate policy. Imagine the panic if a government body publicly admitted that an engineered titanium structure was currently scanning Earth's communication networks while accelerating away at 58 kilometers per second. Financial markets would collapse, and social infrastructure built on cosmic isolation would destabilize overnight. Suppressing this telemetry data is not a dramatic conspiracy, but a calculated institutional choice made by officials who know that certain truths carry destabilization costs their systems cannot handle. As a result, raw spectrographic data is filed away, anomalous light curve readings are reclassified, and the public receives reassuring statements claiming the universe is vast, empty, and indifferent. Indifference, however, does not produce metronomic pulse sequences or sacrificial heat shields timed to dissolve at precise planetary coordinates. Indifference certainly cannot explain the micro-thrust adjustments executed by 3I/Atlas during its transit through our orbital neighborhood. On multiple occasions, satellite tracking networks recorded small but unmistakable course corrections that fall outside passive gravitational drift. Unpowered objects in space follow predictable paths dictated entirely by nearby gravity. They do not execute lateral movements or fine-tune their approach vectors. Yet tracking data confirms localized momentum corrections carrying the distinct mathematical signature of an onboard guidance system making real-time navigational decisions. This entity was not simply falling through our solar system, it was actively navigating it. This realization changes everything about what 3I/Atlas represents. It is not a primitive relic tumbling blindly through the dark, but a functional long-range mechanism carrying out a mission programmed before our sun finished its first rotation. Based on tracking data, its mission did not involve stopping or establishing contact. It involved arriving at a precise coordinate, activating sensors during its closest approach, harvesting accessible data, and continuing outward toward the edge of our solar system. Earth was not a destination, but a checkpoint, a single data collection node on a route across a galactic network so vast that human history represents a fraction of its operational timeline. The archives assembled by 3i/Atlas during its flyby are already being compressed and transmitted towards stellar coordinates that no telescope has cataloged, a fixed point in deep space serving as a relay. Human civilization is not the central focus of this event, but a footnote in an alien navigational log, and our window to observe this reality is closing rapidly. Within the coming months, the luminous cloud surrounding 3i/Atlas will fade from Earth's optical telescopes. Anomalous thermal signatures will dissipate into the freezing void, and the titanium core, still venting pressurized propellants in rhythmic cycles, will pass Neptune and vanish beyond the reach of our instruments. When that happens, institutional authority will complete its narrative, quietly archiving raw spectrographic files while allowing the public to return to the comfort of perceived isolation. The underlying physics, however, cannot be reclassified. Light curve calculations showing 3-millisecond pulse intervals remain permanently stored in observatory databases. Spectral readings confirming nickel-chromium-titanium alloys inconsistent with natural space debris cannot be erased by press releases. Microthrust vectors recorded by satellite arrays leave a mathematical record that official statements cannot explain away. The evidence is locked in servers, and equations do not yield to public relations departments. This permanence is critical because the next phase of this story is not about 3i/Atlas itself, but what happened to it before it reached us, specifically during its close encounter with Jupiter. The extreme gravitational stress of that encounter did not shatter the object as standard comet mechanics predicted. A primitive icy body subjected to Jupiter's gravitational forces should have fragmented into a wide debris cloud, exactly as Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 did in 1994. Instead, Jupiter's gravitational forces cleanly peeled back the outer weathered crust, exposing an engineered internal structure that had remained sealed since its ejection from a now-extinct stellar system. This exposed interior instantly shattered existing scientific classifications. The uncovered core began venting an unprecedented volume of deuterium-saturated heavy water at a distance from the sun where liquids should remain completely frozen. Deuterium-enriched water freezes at different temperatures, interacts uniquely with radiation, and its presence in recorded quantities indicates a formation environment entirely foreign to our solar system. Tracing the object's path backward reveals an origin in a cold stellar nursery that predates our sun. The deuterium-to-hydrogen ratio in the venting plume is 30 times higher than anything in Earth's oceans, representing a chemical fingerprint that can only form in the extreme cold of an alien environment where heavy water crystallizes during early star formation. This object was forged in a completely different cosmic environment under conditions our planetary models were never designed to explain. The biological implications are deeply concerning. If a living system originated in a deuterium-rich environment, its metabolic architecture would operate on an entirely different biochemical framework. Its proteins, cellular structures, and chemical processes would depend on heavy water interactions rather than standard hydrogen-oxygen dynamics. Our planetary defense infrastructure has no protocols for such a scenario, as it was designed solely to track dead space rocks. It cannot address the reality of a machine accelerating through our sector on a trajectory locked in over millions of years. Deepening the mystery, infrared arrays revealed that the emissions from 3i/Atlas originate from precisely engineered nozzle-like apertures that release material in controlled directional streams. The anti-tail pointing toward the sun maintains its shape through continuous active emissions rather than sporadic bursts. The chemical composition consists primarily of nitrogen and water vapor, matching cryogenic propellant systems used for controlled directional maneuvering. Cryogenic propulsion belongs in aerospace engineering, not comet science, yet it is clearly written in the spectral data. This brings us to the most dangerous aspect of the discovery, a gravitational resonance keyhole. According to the tracking matrix, the hexadecimal structured pulses from the object's core are synchronized with a precise spatial coordinate in our upper atmosphere. This narrow passage, measuring only a few hundred meters across, represents a point where Earth's gravity could permanently alter an incoming object's trajectory, locking it into a fatal resonance pattern that guarantees a future surface impact. Officials claim absolute trajectory certainty, yet they ignore non-gravitational forces like the Yarkovsky effect, where uneven heat absorption causes gradual trajectory shifts. For a metallic structure like 3I/Atlas, this effect operates on scales that standard asteroid models severely underestimate. Official statements claiming zero risk of collision rely on incomplete models built for simple rocks, not engineered mechanisms making real-time course adjustments. This gap in our monitoring capability represents a major blind spot in planetary defense that global leaders have every incentive to hide. A near miss is not absolute safety, but a temporary delay. The cosmic void is not an empty space, but an ancient highway traversed by artificial mechanisms and fragments of forgotten star systems. These objects pass through without warning or communication, executing programmed routes before disappearing back into the dark. Somewhere in the deep solar system, another engineered object may already be following a vector that terrestrial telescopes have failed to detect. Current tracking networks are reactive systems built on outdated assumptions that 3I/Atlas has completely invalidated across every measurable metric. Every single characteristic that should have flagged this object as something fundamentally different from a standard cometary body was either misclassified, delayed in publication, or quietly absorbed into a classified repository before it could generate the public conversation it demanded. Hyperbolic trajectories, metronomic pulse emissions, metallurgical core compositions inconsistent with solar system chemistry, active microthrust corrections, and directed cryogenic propellant venting from precisely engineered apertures are not traits of passive rock. They are physical evidence of purposeful design, a silent sentinel sweeping through our celestial backyard on an ancient timeline. As 3I/Atlas recedes into the frozen depths beyond our monitoring range, it leaves us with an unmistakable reality that our isolation is merely an illusion. The algorithms will continue to smooth over the data, and press releases will continue to reassure us that space remains peaceful and predictable, but the raw numbers permanently etched into scientific servers tell a story that cannot be erased. We are living in a cosmos brimming with unseen activity, surrounded by technologies and trajectories that operate entirely outside our institutional control. If you want to stay ahead of the critical disclosures and hidden realities that mainstream channels refuse to discuss, make sure to hit the like button